intensity he imagined she'd inherited from her mother. "You're like me, aren't you?" she continued. "You died trying to reach someone you loved. My son, he was in a motorcycle accident." Mark found it strange how easy it was to talk about now, how the desperate urgency had transformed into something more like acceptance. "I was racing from Phoenix to Reno when I lost control in the fog." "Did you make it? Before the accident?" "No, but I learned something during the journey. Sometimes the attempt matters more than the success. Sometimes love transcends the physical limitations of life and death." Jessica looked back toward the road where Mark knew emergency vehicles would soon arrive to process another tragedy. "What happens now? Do I just disappear?" "That's up to you," Mark said, echoing the words the old man had spoken to him. "Some people choose to linger near the places they loved or the people they've lost. Others move on to whatever comes next. And others?" Mark gestured toward his car, waiting at the edge of the highway above them. "Others choose to help, to be there for the next desperate traveler who needs guidance through their final journey." Jessica considered this. In the distance, Mark could hear sirens approaching, the familiar wail of emergency vehicles racing to a scene where help would arrive too late. "My mom will be okay," Jessica said suddenly. It wasn't a question. "How do you know?" "Because she's stronger than the cancer, stronger than losing me. She'll grieve, but she'll survive. She'll keep working, keep helping other people, keep being the person who taught me that love means doing whatever you can, even when it's not enough." Mark smiled. "You understand?" "I think so." Jessica looked at him with clear eyes. The journey wasn't really about reaching her bedside, was it? It was about proving that nothing, not distance, not danger, not even death, could stop me from trying to get to her when she needed me. And now, Jessica squared her shoulders, and Mark saw her mother's strength reflected in her posture. "Now I help others understand what I've learned. I help them see that love doesn't end just because life does." Together, they climbed back up to the highway. Jessica's car materialized beside Mark's, the same red Honda, but restored, waiting for its new purpose. As they reached the road, Mark saw a familiar figure standing at the scenic overlook. The old man was still there, patient and eternal, watching over the crossing point between worlds. He nodded to Mark and Jessica with the satisfaction of a teacher whose students had grasped a difficult lesson. "How long have you been doing this?" Jessica asked Mark as they reached their cars. Mark thought about it. "I'm not sure. Time works differently here. Maybe hours, maybe years. What I know is that every journey matters. Every person who dies trying to reach someone they love deserves to have that love acknowledged and honored." Jessica got into her Honda and started the engine. "Where do we go now?" "We drive," Mark said simply. "And we watch for the next person who needs our help." As if summoned by his words, headlights appeared in the distance, climbing toward the pass through the thickening fog. Another desperate soul racing against time, driven by love and fear in equal measure. Mark and Jessica pulled onto the highway, flanking the approaching vehicle like guardian angels made of memory and compassion. The night was young, and the mountain roads were treacherous, and somewhere ahead another journey was about to end in ways the traveler couldn't yet imagine. But they wouldn't face that ending alone. Behind them, the old man smiled and faded into the fog, his work complete for another night. The crossing point remained eternal and patient, waiting for the next soul who needed guidance from one world to the next. Mark drove on through the endless night, no longer a passenger, but a guide, helping others navigate the most important journey of their existence, the one that led from desperate love to profound understanding, from mortal limitation to eternal purpose. In the distance, a phone rang in a Sacramento hospital room where a dying woman waited for a daughter who would never arrive. But the love that had driven Jessica through the mountains would reach her mother in ways that transcended physical presence, carried on the prayers and tears of a child who had died trying to come home. And in a Nevada hospital, a young man named Danny Fielding was waking up from surgery, asking nurses when his father would arrive, not knowing that Mark's love had already reached him in the form of a final, desperate journey through the fog-shrouded mountains. The road stretched on through eternity, winding through landscapes both real and imagined, carrying travelers toward destinations they never expected to reach. And Mark drove among them, a ferryman for the modern age, helping lost souls understand that the most important journeys are measured not in miles, but in the depth of love that compels us to begin. The passenger had become the driver. The journey continued. Story 2. The floorboards in the Henley house had a particular way of creaking that Bennett had never quite forgotten, though he told himself he had. Now, standing in the doorway of what the police reports called the scene, he could hear nothing at all. Had heard nothing at all for 29 years. Yet the memory of those creaks seemed to vibrate through the soles of his shoes. The silence that had been his constant companion since childhood felt different here, thicker somehow, as though the very air had weight. Bennett Hartwell made his living writing about other people's tragedies. Crime scenes, he had learned, told stories more honest than witnesses ever could. Blood spatter patterns didn't lie. Forensic evidence couldn't be coached or threatened into silence. The work suited him perfectly. In a world where he could hear no voices, he had become expert at reading what others could not see. The Henley family massacre had drawn him across 3 states to this unremarkable house on Maple Street in Bakersfield, California. 4 family members dead in what appeared to be a murder-suicide, though the detective he'd corresponded with via email had mentioned irregularities that troubled him. Bennett's editor at True Crime Monthly had been eager for the story. Small-town horror always sold well, but Bennett had found himself strangely reluctant to leave San Francisco for this assignment. Standing now in the living room where Susan Henley had been found, Bennett felt that familiar itch between his shoulder blades that meant he was being watched. Ridiculous, of course. The house had been sealed for 3 weeks while the investigation concluded. The neighbors kept their distance. He was alone here, as he preferred to be. The hardwood floors throughout the house were the original 1940s installation. Golden oak that had aged to a rich amber. Beautiful, really, or would have been if not for the dark stains that marked where each body had been discovered. Bennett had seen photographs in the police files, but there was something about standing in the actual space that made his skin crawl in a way his professional experience should have protected him from. It was the pattern room that drew him, though he couldn't say why. The smallest bedroom, according to the floor plan, had been converted into some kind of study or office. Unlike the rest of the house with its polished hardwood, this room had been covered in tatami-style mats, not authentic Japanese tatami, but a modern American interpretation, woven grass over foam padding. The mats had been arranged in a traditional pattern, their edges aligned with mathematical precision. All except one. In the center of the room, a single mat sat askew, its corner lifted as though someone had been trying to look beneath it. The police had photographed it exactly as found, and the detective's notes mentioned that the family had no explanation for the disturbance. More curious still, this particular mat showed signs of water damage or staining that didn't match the others. Bennett knelt beside the displaced mat, his